for the public to get involved in the PUD process. So currently, a PUD application is filed with the department, and the department files notice of the application in the newspapers on our island. And then the applicant posts a sign on the property. You've probably seen those white signs around the island. And then the applicant also sends a letter notifying the surrounding property owners of the PUD application. So those are the three opportunities that the public currently has to be notified and to become involved in the PUD approval process. After that's done, the public or neighbors can mail in letters to the director letting her know of their concerns about the application. And then the director considers those concerns and then makes a decision to approve or deny the PUD permit. Bill 291, which is the County Council initiated bill, wants to change that process a little bit. In addition to the notification requirements in this first box here, after that is done, the planning department would make a recommendation rather than a decision, and that recommendation would go to both of the planning commissions. They would make a recommendation to the county council on the PUD permit, and then the county council would make the final decision to approve or deny the permit. So it's changing the process from an administrative decision to a legislative decision, similar to like a rezone application that the commissions currently make recommendations on. So what is the PUD permit? Essentially, it allows a comprehensive set of variances from the zoning and subdivision codes relating to building site standards such as lot width and size, building height, yards, open space, and road standards. Changing the approval from the director to the county council may be in violation of the county charter. This is the director's concerns with Bill 291. Because the charter says that the planning director shall render decisions on proposed variances. And since a PUD permit is essentially a comprehensive set of variances, the charter says that basically the director should be making those decisions. Before Bill 291 could be adopted, the county council may first have to amend the charter. So with the director's concerns in mind, the department staff met with Councilperson Hoffman, who was the author of Bill 291, to try to find a way to come up with a new bill that addresses his concerns with wanting more community involvement in PUD decisions, but also addressing the director's concerns related to the county charter. As an alternative to Bill 291, the director proposed her own bill. This bill would require that the applicants conduct a community meeting prior to submitting a PUD application to the planning department. And that the PUD developments must be consistent with the intent of the recently adopted community development plans. The director feels that holding a community meeting prior to submittal of a PUD application is both beneficial to the applicant and the community because it allows for the concerns to be identified ahead of time, early on in the process, so that the applicant can modify their development plans before submitting the application to the department. So the approval process that the director is proposing in her bill would require the community meeting to solicit comments from the neighbors ahead of time, and then the application would be submitted to the department, and then the same notice requirements that currently exist would occur. Notice in the newspaper, a sign posted on the property, and letters to the surrounding property owners notifying them that the application was filed. And then the director would consider consider any additional written letters that come in of concern and then make a decision on whether to approve or deny the PUD permit. So that's the two bills that we're proposing in a nutshell. The director is recommending an unfavorable recommendation for Bill 291 and obviously a favorable recommendation for the proposed bill. I also want to point out to you that we did submit a revision to the background and recommendation on a yellow piece of paper to clarify the PUD process and what it's used for, as well as make a correction on the director's proposed bill. Are there any questions?
Any questions for staff? Seeing none? Okay, well, if there's anybody that wants to speak on Bill 91, please come forward. I'm sorry, 291. Mr. Fuque is actually a testifier, but what I was getting at is if anybody who authored the bill wants to come testify or talk about it. But Mr. Fuque, since you're already there, you can stay there. And if our Madam Director would like to elaborate on her proposed bill before we go into public testimony. Okay, well, then we'll just go into public testimony. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm to tell the truth in front of the Hawaii County Planning Commission today?
I do.
Please state your name, where you reside, and you have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Happy to be here. My name is Fuque. I'm a planning consultant, and my business address is 100 Pawangi Street, which is located directly across from this building. On this matter, I think that the important concept that the bill is proposing, which is Councilman Hoffman's bill, is commendable, which is to enable more public input. The recommendation of the planning director is much more appropriate. Very briefly, the reasons are twofold. One is that it's an appropriate separation of functions between the legislative branch and the executive branch. And secondly, it's a question of efficiency. First, as it relates to the separation of functions between the legislative branch, we know that the legislature, or in this case the county council, it establishes and adopts the policies. And once these policies are established, then it becomes the responsibility of the executive branch, be it the planning department or the public works department, to implement and administer them. In this case, the county council adopted the zoning and the subdivision codes and amendments, such as rezoning, for example. These codes establish standards for subdivision and zoning, such as roadway width, water height, lot size, setback, and such. To use an old cliche, however, because one size does not fit all, a process such as a variance or PUD to allow relief by the planning director from these standards was created. Further, notification to surrounding property owners, notices in the newspaper, posting of a sign on the property were also required to better enable the public to weigh in on the request, as the staff had kind of pointed out. To minimize abuse, however, criteria to allow these reliefs were also established. The codes also identified what kind of variances can or cannot be granted. Thus, while the director can grant a setback or a height variance, it would be prohibited from granting a variance or a PUD to allow, for example, a hotel in a single-family residential zone. That's clear. They cannot do it. Such a change, appropriately so, must go through the rezoning process, which means to the commission and to the county council. Thus, in summary, the director administers and enforces the zoning and subdivision codes adopted by the council. If these are standards or areas where the council finds that the variances or PUDs are not appropriate, it would be best to have them clearly defined in the zoning or subdivision codes rather than having the council assume the administrative task for approving or denying the variances. The second item relates to the matter of efficiency. Prior to 1968, the county charter, prior to the 1968 county charter, the planning commission, this body actually, was the approving body of all the subdivisions in this county. This function was delegated to the planning director in 1968 to relieve the commission of being the administrator of the subdivision code, while reserving its time for acting on variances and recommending rezoning and other policy-related applications to the council. Can you imagine if the commission today were to review and act on over 500 subdivision applications annually. It would probably require a full-time commission. Now, because processing variances dominated the commission's agenda between 1968 and 78, and the realization that this was really an administrative function, the charter was amended in 1978 to relegate this function to the planning director. Checks, however, were put in to minimize abuse by increasing the role of the Board of Appeals. The commission now had more time to focus on and act on major land use policy matters such as special permits, use permits, and making recommendations to the council and mayor on critical land use issues such as the CDPs or the general plan. All of these require public hearings and understandably can be quite time consuming. Bill 291 proposes to now have PUD application, which is really like the variation of the variance, processed through the commission and council, purportedly to enable more public input. Such a move will again unnecessarily add to the burden of the commission and council and could further risk politicizing an issue, particularly since legislative actions are not appealable. On the other hand, retaining this function at the director's level, with the appropriate checks afforded by the Board of Appeal, it provides a more efficient and fair approach to processing PUDs. In sum, if the intent of Bill 291 is to increase the opportunity for greater public input and beyond the current requirement of notices surrounding property owning, etc., then the director's proposal addresses this. The proposal mandates the applicant to hold community meeting, and I think that's a good thing. On the other hand, if there are concerns regarding the outcome of the decisions on PUDs, then it would be more appropriate to have the zoning or subdivision code amended to further define what kind of exceptions can or cannot be considered and will create new guidelines or standards. Just transferring what is normally an administrative function to the legislative branch does not necessarily address the concern, and it could excessively politicize an issue. And that's the reason why I think what the director is proposing is way better, and I think it's legally sound. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for the testifier? So what we have in front of us, commissioners, is we have, we're going to take each item separately. Okay, so we have item number 4, which is to either give a favorable or unfavorable recommendation to the county council. And then after that, we're going to take number 5 and give either a favorable or unfavorable recommendation to the county council. So we're going to take it 2 separate items. And oh yeah, and our discussion may overlap the 2. So I'm ready to entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I found one other correction that needs to be made in the director's proposed bill. It's just very minor, but I need to put it on the record. Page 5 of her bill, section 25-6-10. Criteria for granting a PUD permit. We want to strike out permit and put approval, which is consistent with the rest of the language in the bill. And that's it.
Thank you, Maya. At this point, ready to entertain a motion for applicant number 4, County Council Bill number 291.
I entertain a motion that we reject on Bill 291.
Send an unfavorable recommendation to the County Council.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion. Maya, could you flip back to that screen where it shows the current process and the new process? Okay, you know, one thing that I do like is our planning director is getting the community involved. I think that's very important, especially for this next application that we're going to hear. You know, the community needs to get involved, and I think that's a great thing. But I think Bill 291, I think maybe they're trying to micromanage. Maybe the county council might want to try to do that. The bill might make, you know, bringing these issues to them when it should be an administrative matter. So maybe I just think that the county council is maybe trying to micromanage.
I agree. I think the director should be allowed to adopt.
Any more discussion? Okay. Well, Maya, ready?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the vote is to send an unfavorable recommendation to the county council regarding bill number 291. Commissioner Ishibashi.
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzales.
Aye.
Commissioner Moses.
Aye.
Commissioner Ono.
Aye.
And Mr. Chair.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes 5-0.
Okay, moving on to item number 5. I just have to ask, is there anybody here to testify, or if the planning director wants to elaborate on it more?
I will.
Oh,
I didn't sign up, but I will.
can you can sit, have a seat. Okay, please raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm to tell the truth in front of the Windward Planning Commission today?
I do.
Okay, please state your name, where you reside, speak clearly in the mic.
Good morning, Commission. I'm Kerri Marks. I live in Kalmana City in Hilo. I just wanted to comment that the community meeting, the way that you have it set up, that you'd like to do it, is actually not as far-reaching as you might think. Post in the newspaper is good, but I'm poor. I can't afford a newspaper. I read it online for free. Those kinds of things are not posted in the online section. Okay, the posting on the property. I have been driving past that sign by the Kamana Cave for months and months and months and never read it. I had no idea it would even apply to me. The way they put the sign and where they put it, you can't read it when you're driving by. The words are too small. You would have to park up at Kamana Cave and walk down to where the sign is to read it. So that's not, I still haven't read it. As many meetings as I've been to here about the Kalmana Charter School, I still haven't stopped and read the sign. The public meetings. I went to one last month. They had a big bulletin board with about 6 or 7 dates of public meetings they've had over the last several years. I never heard about any of them. Last month's meeting was the first one I was ever notified of, and the only reason I was notified is because I was in the room when they announced that they were having it. So, notifying people that live within 500 feet or 1,500 feet or whatever your rule is not enough. Everybody that drives past that subdivision or that development is also affected, especially in a bottleneck neighborhood like where I live. There's only one way, well, there's 2 ways. If I'm going to Quantico, I can take the extension, but pretty much I take Kalmana Drive up and down the hill 99 out of 100 times. That's how I go. So I just wanted to point that out to you, that it may not be as awesome as you think for those reasons. Okay? Hello.
Thank you. Any questions for the testifier?
What suggestions do you have?
I like the county council thing. They have a process, and the whole community, the whole island is tapped into that process. You could post it on the website too. That would be helpful. The whole county council website needs, honestly, to be burned down to the ground and restarted. It's kind of a tragedy. But that would help. That's more, accessible. The internet is free. You got to figure out how to use these things. That would be my suggestion, was at least post them on the website. Posting stuff on the bulletin board behind the glass at the county building is also a waste of time. As much time as I spend down here and at the county building, that's still not the best way to get stuff. I really have a problem with the 500 feet notification thing. It's not enough. It's not enough.
Thank you. Any more questions for the testifier?
I'm sorry, I have,
Commissioner Ono?
I kind of disturbed by your comment that you're not willing to, I may rephrase this in the wrong way, so please, follow the question. We provide information regarding through the newspaper, which is the more common way of doing it apparently. And you're saying, and I agree with you, it's kind of expensive to be subscribing to the papers. However, your suggestion of the website, who's going to be maintaining those things?
There should be staff to do it. That's really easy. That's copying and pasting something. That would take minutes, especially if it was a process for all boards and commissions. And, yeah?
Well, I guess what I'm looking at is that we're trying to stay within budget.
that means that we now need to look at someone else being assigned the responsibility for all of the entire county activities. We have notices posted, and you see, you know, you don't have time. Not you don't have time. It's too small to be read a lot fast. I guess I'm thinking that the suggestion is maybe we need to come up with other suggestions more than just saying that the website. I guess
Okay,
the
expand
means of communication
community
is-
involvement then to a mile.
I'm sorry?
Expand the the radius that you notify neighbors to a much larger radius.
Yeah, see, but the thing is, I guess what, I hope we're not getting into an argument here, but to be mailing things out to the residences more than 5, that's gonna cost us more money, and therefore your tax money again. To what extent is it gonna be enough for you to say, okay, I'm satisfied with the means of communication?
When I, for the first time in 5 years and 7 meetings, am notified of a meeting that affects my neighborhood. That hasn't happened yet. Honestly, do away with the newspaper notices. Does anybody really read that page? They're all kind of jammed together in the tiniest print possible.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Any further questions for the testifier? Fellow commissioners, we can also get to some of this up in discussion, so I'm ready to, if there's nobody else to testify, I'm ready to entertain a motion. Do we have somebody here to testify? Hi, can you raise your right hand? Do you swear and affirm to tell the truth in front of the Hawaii County Planning Commission today? Please state your name and where you before you get started. And speak in the microphone, please.
Margaret Wille, Waimea. I'm speaking on behalf of myself as an individual member of the community, Waimea. And just really responding to Mr. Ono's questions. I too, if we were to adopt this, the director's proposed changes, have concern about the extent of public notification. And I would like to see it go to the, if there's a community plan action committee in that area, I feel that's a good forum. They get notice out, people were the community members. We actually did that with 2 of the PUDs that came up recently, Fuque and 1010. I thought that was a good forum, and I think it would develop over time, and you already have that notice in place. I also agree with the utilization of the internet. I actually tried to get a charter amendment to make that a requirement, and as I recall, Mr. Ishida, Corporation Counsel Ishida at that point said, well, we're working on that and doing it. If you get these things onto the internet, it's very accessible, and I think that is the modern way. It's just bringing us up to the 21st century. I don't think it's asking a lot. You could even get a volunteer to come in and help. So I would like to see it both in the internet, and to the extent there's a CDP committee or an equivalent, there's a Hilo neighborhood board. It's still, what their input is advisory, it's going to the director, and I think that there's a greater sense of trust that you have an informed community. So, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Madam Director.
Just for clarification purposes, I guess the difficulty in what you put in the bill is, one, not every community has a CDP action committee. So it would only work with action committees. It wouldn't work for other areas, like Hilo does not have a CDP action committee. What the concerns of the speaker were to the community meeting, which in my bill is before an application is submitted. And so, but I'm like, I don't know what to do. We have signs on property notifying people that there's an application. And the reason we went to that was that was more visible, because unless you know something's going on, most people are not regularly going to check the county council website or the planning department website I mean, let's be honest, most people are not political junkies that are gonna show up at every meeting. They're busy, they're working. So the sign on the yard, on the property, was the council's attempt to get notice directly into the community where an application, so whether it's a subdivision. But I don't know what the response to is that, well, the sign's not big enough. You can't read it, or I didn't stop to look at it, because if you weren't gonna look at the sign, I don't think people would have gone to the website because you didn't know there was anything to go look for. So I don't know what you do. You could look at expanding the 500 feet to 1,000 feet, or you could require perhaps that a sign announcing the community evening go up on the property. Because people theoretically you drive by, you see, and it needs to be in a certain type, perhaps, so that it's more visible. But that's all front end. What you're addressing more is kind of back end after the applications actually come in. And the process we have right now is the action committees get notice when the application is. They can determine whether it's something they want to have on their agendas. The last two that went was because one I directed because I knew it was big enough that they'd be interested, and the other one they requested. And then on smaller stuff, small subdivisions and stuff, they basically, 2-lot subdivision, they're not interested in having that automatically go to them for hearing. But perhaps the issue is signage, size of the sign, and the size of the type in announcing to the community that something's going on. Because I just don't think that putting it on a website is going to tell people that there's something they need to go in and find. Because the average citizen, if they're not reading the paper and they're not reading the sign on the property, I don't know what you're going to hook them, because they're probably not reading the agenda to see that this is, what you see here is people word of mouth more than anything else, notifying their neighbors or through the community association. Perhaps having an accessible directory of community organizations and presidents of those community organizations, so that they're on a list that regularly gets contacted. Like I'm the former president of my community association, and even though the community association isn't doing much, I still get land use commission agendas mailed to me on a regular basis, so I know if there's anything going on, and I can go notify my neighbors. So maybe that's a process that the council or the department can initiate and incorporate.
And let me just say, I don't have a problem with this signage on the locations. I think as long as they're visible enough that someone can see them, that if they want to stop, they can stop. But I really feel strongly about having it be available on the internet. You can, for certain things that come up, get on a list that you regularly get sent back, such as I think a lot of us do for something. Coming up, if there's anyway, other departments do it. You can just get on a list, and then you're on that contact list and hit one hit. But I also think that if you do have it on the internet, people can, community members, pick out somebody that's going to regularly check it, and it's there and available. So again, I do feel strongly that's how people communicate, and if it's available. I also feel with the CDPs, I like having it go just to say that in advance and before the roads get put in, around the center, or the community members say, why don't you put them around the far end and have the outside end and get a little bit more interaction between the developer and the community. I also, in terms of the 500 feet, my one concern there is that, say the Waikiki PUD, my understanding is you did that, and the legal notice was within 500 feet of the land being developed, but the people using that new land to be developed would be sharing the same roads, so that you're burdening roads that are common to all in that subdivision. And I actually think that where you have a common area that impacts that it should really go out, but that's another
Well,
issue.
I was just gonna briefly mention that. It's one thing, in Waikiki, every property owner actually did get notice because the, proposer paid for the community association to mail notice out. But if you're talking someplace like Hawaiian Paradise Park, where the roads are used by all the owners and they're all built, that's 8,800 plus notices that would have to go out for something like what we have in the special use permit.
And I think there is a balance in there, I know, but I think that where you are sharing the roads, I know I talked to Bill Moore and Bob Bakery in terms of Waikiki, and got assurance that actually all of the members were informed, but I do think it's a concern. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Any more questions for Testify? Ready to entertain a motion to either send a favorable or an unfavorable recommendation to the council.
I'd like to propose we send a favorable recommendation to the county council on the director's bill.
With the amended changes, there was an amendment changing up
With the amended changes.
Is there a second?
Can I say something without seconding?
We need to get it second before we get into discussion.
Okay. Second.
Okay, discussion. Go ahead, Commissioner Moses.
So could we add to this that we should look at the process of notification in the community, whether it is to expand the 500 feet current rule, or looking into other options as how we're going to notify the community?
Madam Director.
If you wanted to, in section 25-6-7, want to add additional requirements, because basically what it has in section 25, this is page 5 of the proposed bill. In section 25-6-7, subsection B, says that it basically complies with whatever is required under section 25-2-4, which are the notices that are required pursuant to the code, and those were set in a prior bill. But because this bill is for you, you could add additional requirements here. You could add a requirement that a notice of the community meeting be posted on the subject property if you wanted to, because I think that that's probably the most effective, because anybody driving past the property would see it. You could add something that says if you had, well, we have community homeowner and business associations or organizations in the area that are already required in here to be notified. So if you've got a kumiai, you know, and that's more than just, 500 feet. If there's a kumiai in the area, community association, you're required to notice them here under item B. So, but this is where you would add stuff if you wanted to add,
I think that, what we're required to in section 25-6-7, subsection B, 1 through 7, that's the minimum, and I think that's sufficient. Personally, I would like to see more, internet stuff, updating on the internet, especially for our county. I was on the Parks and Recs website, and there's things from 2011 on there. I got some results for some Parks and Recs things, and it's 2013 already. So yeah, I'd like to see the county to try and update it more often, but that's within each department. So, but regarding land use and regarding this application, it's everything's done as far as the minimum things that we need to do, and I think people that get involved in community meetings, in commission meetings like this, I think it's a personal preference. Not everybody, they may hear about it, but they don't want to get as involved, and it's a lot of the time it's after the fact. So, we do reach out to the community in some way or form, and yeah, it can get better. I agree with what Ms. Wiley was saying, but the county is currently doing all the minimums, and this is the current minimum if we were to send a favorable recommendation.
Mr. Chair, if I could also just point out what the current notification requirements are.
Okay, please do so.
Section 2524 requires that when that land or property is in an urban district, notice has to be sent to property owners within 300 feet of the perimeter of the property. And then for land that's agriculture, it's 500 feet. That's because agricultural lots are usually larger. So those are the current notice requirements that are proposed in this bill. In addition to any community, homeowner, or business associations known to be active in the surrounding community, which goes beyond the current requirements.
Thank you, Madam Director.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one of the reasons when we do notice requirements that we typically refer to the section of the code that sets up notice requirements is if you start setting up different requirements in different sections of the code, it becomes very difficult to figure out. And also, if the council later amends the provision on notice requirements, then it automatically amends all the notice requirements in every section. If you start putting in sections, and every time you want to amend it, you're going to have to amend every section of the code, which is why we typically put all the notice requirements in just one section. Obviously, that this discussion had come up earlier because I think there had been some discussion at the council of 1,000 feet on some types of rezonings, I think it was. And so, obviously, that could be amended. But, another thing here is if you wanted to put in additional meetings, if you wanted to have, you wouldn't necessarily be in that section, but a requirement that the department post the application on its website, you could put something in here for that.
So do we have to make the recommendation, or can we just say that we'd like for this to be reviewed and then bring recommendations?
Yeah, you could make a recommendation that and not amend this bill, but do a recommendation along with the bill that you think the council and the department should review the distance for notices and expand the distance so that more neighbors are notified within a permit.
And even the process of notification could be looked at.
Yeah, you can make that recommendation without amending the bill.
That's exactly what I'd like to recommend.
Okay, I have another question for Madam Director or staff. What is the process for the community development plan? Let's say it is on the agenda for the community development plan. What is the time frame of that? And what's the time frame on that? And what is their notification process to the community?
We post an agenda, we mail it out. What we're doing now is when an application comes in, and it's not just PUDs, any application that typically requires notice to neighbors. We then, at the same time that we notify other agencies, because we always notify fire department, DPW, Department of Health, please comment on this application. We now send that same letter to the action committee so that they get this notice at the same time that every other agency gets notice saying, hey, this is in our office. We give them a brief description of what the application is, and then they can ask us for the full application. Because what we want them to know is how many acres, how many lots, what is it doing? Is it a rezone? Is it a PUD? And then they can put it on their agenda and ask the applicant to come and do a presentation. We've done that with, since we changed to this process, we've done 2 PUDs that way where it's gone to the South Kohala Action Committee so that they could see what was happening in that. And that's separate and apart from the community meeting that's in this bill. That's another process. And the action committees are free to determine what they want to do. And they can go beyond PUDs. They can ask for subdivisions. They can ask for variances and stuff to come before them too, if they want to. So, that's the current process. We, changed this about maybe 6 months ago, and since then we've had 2 that, went through. That's open to the public. I think they had larger attendance at the community meetings though than they did at the action committee, but I'm not 100% sure on that. With everything, I think there's always an issue of notice. We've had people say that putting in the paper is not enough. We've had people saying on the website it's not enough because they don't have a computer. So there isn't a perfect way. So we try doing multiple approaches, and then anyone who wants to be on our email list, we regularly email all our subdivision applications, and whatever applications are in the department go out on a semi-monthly basis to people.
Thank you, Madam Director. Answer my question. Any more discussion amongst commissioners? Any questions to staff? Did you want to amend? Are you making amendments to your motion? Okay, so what is our amendment? And we're going to add in 25-6-7, subsection B. I guess we'll add in number 8. And what is going to be the exact language? Can staff help us with that?
I thought Commissioner Moses said she just wanted to make a recommendation that the department and the council look at improving the process, the notification process. I didn't hear that she actually wanted to amend the bill.
Yeah, and I think she's concerned about the notification in 25-2-4, which is not part of this bill, which has the 300 and the 500 feet, that she wants both the department and the council to look at expanding that, and as well as the process of notification.
So we're not amending that, it's just a recommendation to the agencies.
Correct.
And since Commissioner Gonzales was the maker of the motion, are you okay with that?
I guess, yeah, I'm fine with it.
Okay. I know Commissioner Moses.
It's kicking me under the table.
Okay, so any more discussion with fellow commissioners? If not, we're ready to take a vote. Corporation Council? Evan?
Let's see, this particular recommendation, section 25-2-4 is mentioned as part of the proposed amendments here. So I would say that it is just within the scope of what we can discuss in terms of making a recommendation.
Okay, so correction, so it can be in the motion.
Let's have restate exactly what the motion is.
Please.
Okay. So, and then maybe Ivan, you can correct me if it's wrong. So the motion is to send a favorable recommendation to the county council on the director's proposed bill with the additional amendments that she suggested, as well as a recommendation to have the planning department and county council review the notification requirements in section 25-2-4 to try to expand the notice area or improve the notice process.
Okay, is the commissioner that made the motion okay with that?
I'm fine with that.
And Commissioner Moses is fine with that too, so ready to take a vote.
Just for the record, once the motion has been made and seconded, it is the property of the entire board, so you should make sure that there's no objection from anybody else.
Okay, any other fellow commissioners, do you object to our changes in the motion?
Second that motion.
There's no objections.
Third, fourth.
There are no other objections, then we can go ahead.
Okay, if there's no other objections, Maya?
Okay. Commissioner Gonzales.
Aye.
Commissioner Moses.
Aye.
Commissioner Ishibashi.
Aye.
Commissioner Ono,
Aye.
and Mr. Chen.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes 5-0.
Everybody will be notified in writing, and we will take a 5-minute recess.